Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the Saturday night slate of college football DFS for week 8. That's right, Saturday, October 19th, 2024, the night slate, the one starting at 7 p.m. And I got to be honest, y'all, this is a really good night slate. This is a really good slate of games, headlined by my Texas Longhorns, hook 'em. And so we're going to break down all 7 games here in the night slate. We're going to tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who you need to be targeting in your DFS lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel for this night slate. Now, if you have not seen our video for the Saturday main slate, make sure you go check that out. Just scroll down in the channel feed. You'll be able to find it, whether you're listening on audio or watching on YouTube. But this is specifically for the night slate. And make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because I'm going to be doing my best to make sure we get all the Saturday night slates covered in addition to the main slates, because there's not a whole lot of people out there that are doing content for the night slates. And so I want to be able to provide that for you guys. And also, no promises on the midweek slates, but I'm going to get to as many of them as I can get to. This week we got to the Tuesday slate. Didn't get to do any of the other ones, but we do have midweek college football going on now. It's not MACtion season yet, but it's Q's action, Conference USA action. So I'm going to be getting to as many of the midweek slates as I can. So make sure you're subscribed so you can be with us for that. No promises on every slate though, because we're about to enter my busy season. You guys that have been here before know that I am a high school teacher and coach. I'm about to be starting a girls flag football season, which is going to be super interesting, as well as my normal varsity basketball season, and college basketball is about to come back, which we also do content for here as well. So, there's going to be a little bit of squeeze on content, but I'm going to be getting out what I can get out. Just know that if I put something out, it's well-researched, well thought out. I would not put out a video or audio episode if I was not confident in what I was delivering, bottom line. And so if I don't have the time to research it and put it out there, I'm not going to. But anyway, I've been dribbling on for too long. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can be with us here in the future. Let's go ahead and dive into this night slate. All right, so game number 1 is between LSU and Arkansas. LSU heading to Arkansas in this one. And I gotta say, this is a little bit weird. I kind of thought this was like a Thanksgiving weekend game. Maybe they've switched the schedules up. But anyway, LSU is 2.5-point favorites in this game with a game total of 55.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 29-27 in favor of LSU. If you are new here, we do not do decimal points for the implied totals because you can't go out and actually score 0.25 of a point. So 29-27 is your implied total. This has a shootout written all over it. LSU's Garrett Nussmeier is the number 1 quarterback by salary. And I got to say, I kind of agree with it. He's hit 300 passing yards in, every game this season except one. And he has, been pretty good. He's been, no less than 37 pass attempts in any game so far this season. So you're getting a ton of passing volume. You're getting a ton of passing success with an offense that just straight up loves to pass the ball. And I kind of get why he's priced up here so far. And I got to say, like, if you were just to ask me to just blindly rank the quarterbacks and say, hey, who is the most likely quarterback to finish QB1 on the slate? He'd probably be first. Just being honest, maybe second behind one guy we're going to talk about later that's a little bit more of a dual threat, really high ceiling guy, but I would probably have Garrett Nussmeier as QB1 for this slate, which is where he's priced up to be at. At the running back spot for LSU, it's still a little bit of a committee. Caden Durham led the team in carries with 12 last game. Josh Williams had 9. Caleb Jackson is almost entirely out of the game plan now. He had 1. And really, like, Durham's the only guy I'm interested in, but he's priced up now at $5,500 on DraftKings. I don't really think he's all that great of a play. Arkansas is a really good run defense, and this is a team that just straight up wants to throw the ball. They have one of the highest pass rates in the country. So I'm going to be off of the LSU running backs this week. At the wide receiver spot, so we've been talking about kind of the ifs, for this receiving room all season long. And really, Chris Hilton Jr. has been one of the big reasons, and he's already been ruled out for this game. That is, helps us out when making our lineups. CJ Daniels is supposed to be back for this game. He did not play against Ole Miss, but at the end of the day, those two guys, like Daniels coming back is probably only going to eat into a little bit of the targets. I think he's going to take a lot of the Xavier Thomas targets, which we saw Xavier Thomas catch 2 passes last week. This offense is clearly starting to lump around 3 receivers. Really 2 receivers and a tight end. Kyron Lacey is their number 1 wide receiver, led them with 14 targets last game, only caught 5 of them. But I got to say, I'm not a big fan of playing him in DFS formats. And the reason why is because you think of the LSU receivers that we've had over the last 5 years, Jefferson, Chase, Neighbors, Brian Thomas, like they're all like big play guys and they all get that volume, right? Lacey's just not a big play wide receiver. And he's not getting enough volume where it's like, oh, he can have 10 catches for, 79 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, he's just not having the type of games that we need in DFS for him to pay off that salary. So I'm probably going to be off of him. And when I'm stacking up Nussmeier, I'm probably going to be strongly considering Aaron Anderson. Every time I watch him, I'm impressed with him. He's been double-digit fantasy points every single game this season. He's just really shifty, really quick, really good at changing direction. And I think he kind of fits what LSU wants to do well. He's a big play threat. He's caught 3 passes of more than 40 yards this season. So he's probably the guy that I'm going to be stacking with Nussmeier when I do play Garrett Nussmeier. But also don't discount Mason Taylor. He's one of the best tight ends in college football. He is routinely involved in the game plan. He had 10 targets in their last game. I forgot to mention Aaron Anderson did have 8 targets in that game. So really those 3 guys are the 3 that I'm considering from this LSU offense. Daniels being back, like I said, I think he's just going to eat into Xavier Thomas, but I'm not super interested in playing him, even though he is at a cheap price tag. On the Arkansas side, they are quarterbacked by Taylor Green, who really has had 3 dud games in a row. But if we're being honest, look at the defenses that he's played. Auburn's a pretty good defense. Texas A&M's a really good defense. Tennessee's a really good defense. So I'm not really ready to write him off just because he didn't play well against bad defenses. He is a dual threat. He has a ton of upside. And because he's had those 3 dud games, now he's down to $7,200 on DraftKings. To me, that makes him a very affordable play going up against an LSU defense that is considerably worse than the 3 that he's, had to go up against. So I really do like Taylor Green as a play at $7,200. I totally get if you want to onslaught this game and go Nussmeier and Green at both your quarterback spots. I think that's a totally viable strategy. At the running back spot, we do have genuine workhorse status for Jaquindon Jackson. 20 carries in their last game against Tennessee, and he turned it into 17 fantasy points. That's pretty solid. Like, Tennessee's defense is really good. So this guy's going to be able to produce no matter who he's going up against. $6,800 is a pretty hefty price tag, but I'm willing to pay it. I do think Jaquindon Jackson has a good game here in this one. At the wide receiver spot, we've been talking all season long how Andrew Armstrong has really been the only playable wide receiver from this Arkansas side. Last time against Tennessee, 9 catches, 132 yards, good for 25.2 DraftKings points, 11 targets in that game. He was still clearly their target leader, but now Batman has a Robin, and it's Isaac Satania. He's had back-to-back games of 5 catches or more. He's had double-digit fantasy points in 3 straight games, and he's only scored 1 touchdown over that stretch. This is a guy that is a big play threat. He's starting to very clearly become the second option in this receiving room, and I don't mind him as a second stacking option at $4,500. Although with Taylor Green being a dual threat, getting a lot of his fantasy points via his legs, I don't think you have to stack him. But if you do, Armstrong and Satania are the 2 guys you want to do it with. And then I got to give another shout out to Luke Haas, the tight end. I'm not giving up on him yet. He has been kind of a dud so far this season, but I'm not giving up on him. I do think he's genuinely talented. We saw him have some big games last year. $3,400. If you're playing enough lineups, he's worth taking a flyer on. Next up, we have the game that I want to talk about. Georgia heading to Austin to take on the Texas Longhorns. Texas is currently 5-point favorites with a game total of 56.5 points. And actually, I worded that incorrectly. There has been some money come in on the Texas side. So I do think that line is moving a little bit towards Texas. But either way, the implied total is about 31-26 in favor of Texas. This is the highest game total on the slate. Now, I got to say, never in the Kirby Smart era at Georgia has Georgia been a team that produces a lot of shootouts. Never have they been a team where you load up a DFS slate on DraftKings and you're like, oh, I am going right to the Georgia game. I'm playing players in that game. But that's kind of what they are right now. Georgia has become a shootout team. And the reason why is because they have a very effective quarterback in Carson Beck, but also they have a ton of injuries in their defense. And they have not really – the backups haven't come in and played all that well, which is kind of shocking because at Georgia, the backups that come in are usually just other 4- and 5-star recruits with great pedigrees that are really good at football. And that hasn't been the case for Georgia so far this year. So with as many injuries as this Georgia defense has had, I do think that this game could turn into a shootout. And I do think that you can play players on this game. Vegas clearly agrees with me. They have the total at 56.5, and they clearly think that, this is going to be one of the higher scoring games on the slate. Carson Beck is absolutely in play. He's down to $7,800 on DraftKings, which our biggest complaint has always been his price tag and how hard it is for him to reach value for his salary. Well, now he's only $7,800. He only has to score 24 fantasy points to hit 3 times value for his salary, which is really our goal, right? And with Carson Beck, 24 fantasy points. If he throws for 300 yards, the way DraftKings does scoring, that's instantly 15. He gets you 2 touchdowns. There's your 23 right there. He gets you any kind of rushing or any kind of more yards or touchdowns, and there you go. You've got it. So I do think there's a chance he could do that. I do think that the secondary is the weak part of this Texas defense. They have not been tested yet. They haven't played a good quarterback yet. So if this game turns into a shootout, I could absolutely see Carson Beck smashing on this slate. At the running back spot, I do think Trevor Etienne is a sneaky play. The Texas front seven has been really, really good, but Georgia has shown that they're going to give the ball to, did I call him Travis Etienne? I meant Trevor Etienne. Travis is his older brother. They're going to give the ball to Trevor Etienne in close games, and they're going to give it to him often. And so I think he's a decent play. $5,600 is a really affordable price tag for a guy who is clearly going to be his team's workhorse running back. At the wide receiver spot, we got a little bit of clarity with this. Georgia does love to rotate wide receivers, but Colby Young is out for this game. And so to me, that kind of helps determine which Georgia receivers you want to play in DFS. More work is going to go towards Dylan Bell and Arian Smith as outside wide receivers. Dylan Bell has been pretty productive this season. He's had 2 games of 19 fantasy points or more. At his salary of $5,300, we really want him to put up 16 fantasy points, so we know he can do that. Against Alabama, he put up 30. So we know that he has a big game in him. He is a big play guy. And Arian Smith is very much the same way. Had 28 fantasy points against Alabama, 27 against Mississippi State. So those 2 guys are big play threats, big games waiting to happen. Dominic Lovett is the volume guy out of the slot, though. He's more consistent in terms of his production. He does get more consistent targets than the other 2. He's not as much of a big play threat. But to me, depending on how you see it, if you're looking to stack up Carson Beck, I would either go Bell or Smith. And then if you want to double stack it, add in Lovett. That's just how I see it. Now, on the Texas side, Quinn Ewers is a quarterback, and I'm going to be honest, even as a Texas homer, yes, I'm a Texas homer. At least I admit it. There's a lot of other, content creator shows out there that don't admit they're a homer. I am a Texas homer. They're my team. Quinn Ewers did not look great against Oklahoma. He just didn't, miss some easy throws, especially early in the game. They were really able to win that game with their run game, with their defense, not really with the arm of Ewers. But if this game turns into a shootout, there's potential there. So really, I'm going to be honest, the only way that I'm going to be playing Quinn Ewers is going to be if I'm playing Carson Beck on the other side and hoping that this game just goes back and forth between 2 great quarterbacks. Because I think otherwise at $8,700, whatever other story you want to tell yourself, that's a really hefty price tag for Quinn Ewers to try to hit value for. Now, at the running back spot, this got interesting for Texas last game. So Jaden Blue has been their guy since the start of the season, but he's been banged up. And Quintravion Wisner was the guy against Oklahoma, had 13 carries in that game to Jaden Blue's 10. Is it something? Possibly. Is it nothing? Possibly. I do think that right now Blue is the better player, but I do think that, as games kind of get out of hand, they're going to lean on Wisner a little bit more. So to me, if the game stays close, I do think it could be a Jaden Blue kind of game, which I think it's highly likely that this game stays close, but it would not shock me to see Wisner make it close to a 50-50 split yet again. At the wide receiver spot, Isaiah Bond is questionable, which really stinks because he's really been the only consistent target in this wide receiver room. He's really the only guy that I would consider playing at wide receiver. If you're playing Quinn Ewers, I would absolutely stack him with Isaiah Bond. If Bond misses, then somebody else has to pick up the slack. But I don't know who it's going to be because after Bond, they've really been rotating their wide receivers. It could be Golden. It could be Moore. It could be Ryan Wingo. It could be Silas Bolden. I don't really know what they're going to do if Bond is out in terms of who picks up the slack. It might just be another rotation of those 4 guys with all 4 of them seeing a bigger piece of the rotation. But your guess is as good as mine as to which one of them ends up going off if that is the case. All right, next up, we've got Central Florida taking on Iowa State. Iowa State is currently 14-point favorites with a game total of 49.5 points. The projected total is about 32-18 in favor of the Cyclones. So for UCF, they are supposedly starting Ja'Cory Brown at quarterback. I say supposedly because, they started out last game where they announced that E.J. Colson was going to be the starter against Cincinnati, and he played like a quarter and didn't look good and was subsequently benched. So, if you went by the news that he was starting, it was a little bit misleading because of how quick of a leash they had on him. But Ja'Cory Brown was the guy that finished that game. Absolutely in play on this slate for me. He's a Miami transfer that had a really, really solid bowl game for them last season. He is a runner. He can put up fantasy points with his legs. He had 20 fantasy points in pretty much 3 quarters against Cincinnati. So we know the upside is there. And they're going to be playing from behind. They're going to be asking him to drop back and complete passes or take off and use his legs and run. And I do think that you can run on Iowa State's defense. Iowa State plays this 3-3-5 defense with 3 high safeties. It is quite vulnerable to the run. So Brown as a runner, I do think is in play. I do think RJ Harvey as their running back is in play also. He had his worst game of the season against Cincinnati. Really, you got to attribute some of that to the fact that they had different quarterbacks coming in and out of the lineup. The offense just really could not get any cohesion, and he didn't score a touchdown in that game. It's the first game all season that he didn't score a touchdown. So I really do think that it's a good bounce back spot for him. Like I said, I do think you can run on Iowa State's defense. $9,400 is an awfully steep price tag to pay for RJ Harvey. I would personally have him as if I were just purely blindly ranking the running backs on this slate, I'd probably have him third, but he's priced up first. So that's a little bit of an issue. At the wide receiver spot for UCF, Ja'Cory Brown should provide them with more passing volume than they had under KJ Jefferson, because KJ Jefferson was much more of a primary runner than Ja'Cory Brown is. Ja'Cory Brown's more of a scrambler than a runner. So if there's going to be more passing volume, you would think that would make the wide receivers more playable. Against Cincinnati, all that volume went to Kobe Hudson. Kobe Hudson ended that game with 13 targets. He caught 7 of them, ended with 27 fantasy points. To me, he's the one UCF receiver that you would want. He's a real easy stack partner with Ja'Cory Brown. And with him getting that many targets, I really personally don't feel like playing anybody else from this team from a DFS perspective. They have Xavier Townsend hit the transfer portal, and no one has really stepped up and taken that role yet. Could somebody do that? Yeah, but I'd probably rather be late to that than early to that. And I'm just going to play Kobe Hudson as my UCF wide receiver. On the Iowa State side, Rocco Becht is yet again priced in a sweet little price range where he's $6,300, so he only needs 19 DraftKings points to pay value, and that is very much a reasonable goal for him to do. He's had 3 games this season out of 6 where he's been over 20 fantasy points, so he absolutely could do it. And then one of the other games was 18, which wouldn't kill you in this game either. And that was against Iowa, who's a much better defense than UCF. UCF's defense is really bad. So I do think that Rocco Becht is absolutely in play. If you're looking to spend down at the quarterback position, he's probably the best spend down quarterback on this slate. At the running back spot, this has been committee central, but they're starting to kind of figure it out. Carson Hansen last game against West Virginia, 20 carries, 3 of which were touchdowns, 27.6 fantasy points. To me, he is the guy you want to play. He's priced at $3,000 minimum on DraftKings. He's an absolute smash play, in my opinion. Jalen Jackson was the second running back last week. 12 carries against West Virginia was not super effective, only 4.5 fantasy points. But even with that poor performance, $3,600 for this team's RB2 is worth a look. Abu Sama was the guy that was supposed to be the guy coming into the season. He's a big play waiting to happen. Had some huge games last year, but he's not getting as many carries as Hansen and Jackson. He had 2 last game. But can I even consider him for this slate? I think you can, because he's only $3,500. UCF is a very bad defense. One of these running backs is going to score a touchdown. One of these running backs is probably going to break off a long run too. I think they're all 3 in play for me. Even Abu Sama is as few carries as he's getting. I think he's worth a look in GPPs if you're playing enough lineups, because he can break off a long run and nobody's going to play it. At the wide receiver spot, we love how Iowa State plays their wide receivers. We just love it. They throw to 2 guys, only 2 guys. And so game in, game out, who's going to be catching the passes. You know who to stack Rocco Becht with. It's Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. Higgins had 7 targets last game. Noel had 8, which means they combined for 15. Rocco Becht had 26 pass attempts. So those 2 combined for over a 50% target share. That's quite significant. Both of them are absolutely in play. I think they're both great plays. If you're playing Rocco Becht, play one of them, play both of them. Either way, these are the 2 guys that are getting passes. Don't even consider anybody else. All right, 3 games down. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to continue on with the rest. Now, before we continue, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have if you reach out to me. I'm also well aware that I'm recording this on a Thursday night. The slate doesn't start till Saturday night, so sometimes opinions change, sometimes things happen. If you want my thoughts, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to share. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. Fantasy Corner Discord is a place of a lot of great and smart people who play DFS for a lot of different sports. College football is one of them. NBA is covered, MLB is covered, college basketball is really popping as well, where just you got a lot of people in there talking strategy, talking plays, talking picks, and then sweating it out together and just having a good old time. It's just a lot of good people to talk DFS with. It's really positive experience. I cannot recommend it enough if you're looking for people to talk DFS with. I also do write an article to my Patreon for every single college football DFS slate, including the midweek slates, where I profile who are my core plays as well as why. Now, I'm always going to be honest. I'm not going to sit here and guarantee that you can just win thousands of dollars by just plugging in my guys into a lineup and hitting submit. It's not that easy. Anyone who promises that is full of it. But what I can promise is that you can get very well thought out, well researched takes from somebody who understands college football from an X's and O's perspective, understands DFS from a game theory perspective, and help you get better at playing college football DFS. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. We got game number 4. It's going to be Kansas State taking on West Virginia, another battle in the Big 12. And this is one of the best games of the slate, in terms of a DFS perspective to me. You've got Kansas State as 3-point favorites, game total of 55.5 points, one of the slate's highest, meaning the projected total is about 29 to 26 in favor of Kansas State. So on the Kansas State side, you've got Avery Johnson, a great dual threat quarterback. This guy has the potential to break the slate. And the reason I say that is because he can absolutely get unleashed as a runner. And oh, by the way, he can beat you with his arm as well. Basically, if you look at Oklahoma State, where he put up 39 fantasy points, Oklahoma State's entire plan in that game was, we're going to make Avery Johnson beat us from the pocket. And guess what? Avery Johnson beat him from the pocket. Threw for 259 yards and 3 touchdowns. And oh, by the way, he also ran for 60 more yards and 2 touchdowns as well. He has the potential to do that. This West Virginia defense is not good. I think Avery Johnson has the highest ceiling of any quarterback on this slate. And I do think he's one of my favorite plays in the slate at the quarterback position. Now, at the running back spot, I also love DJ Giddens. I love DJ Giddens. I play him all the time. Like pretty much every slate he's on, I play him. And I would play DJ Giddens over anybody else on this offense, personally. Like, if you're just asking me, hey, who are you most likely to play from Kansas State? DJ Giddens is my answer. So as much as I love Avery Johnson, probably going to have more DJ Giddens. And the reason why, he's had 27 fantasy points in 3 of 6 games. Kansas State's offense, they really want to run the ball. They rank 30th in the country in rush rate. This is a team that wants to run. DJ Giddens is their guy. He absolutely is a guy that I'm going to be playing in a ton of my lineups. Now, also, don't discount the rest of the Kansas State backs. Dylan Edwards is a unique little player, transfer from Colorado. He's very fast. Like, that's what he does. He comes in and spells Giddens every now and then, and has 4 games over double-digit fantasy points so far this season. So if you're looking for like a GPP dart throw, I don't mind it. To me, there's a little bit of upside with Edwards. At the wide receiver spot, Kansas State has really struggled to find consistency at the wide receiver spot this season until recently. Jace Brown has become their guy. Against Colorado, he had 9 targets out of Avery Johnson's 23 pass attempts. That is over a 33% target share. He turned that into 33 fantasy points. He is clearly this team's number 1 wide receiver. He is clearly the guy you would want to stack Avery Johnson with, but I don't think you have to stack Avery Johnson. I think you could even play Avery Johnson and DJ Giddens and just say, hey, Kansas State is just going to steamroll them running the ball. He's the receiver that I would want to target, but also I'm not going to give up on Garrett Oakley. If I'm not going to give up on Luke Haas, I'm not going to give up on Garrett Oakley. He is this team's tight end. He was supposed to be stepping into the Ben Sinnott role. Hasn't really happened yet this season, but he's only $3,000. He's playing a lot of snaps. I don't mind it as a dart throw. Will Swanson is another one of these teams' tight ends who's playing a lot of snaps, but he's not as regularly involved in the passing game. So I would really, if I'm looking at playing Kansas State receivers, Jace Brown is option 1, and then there's a huge gap, and then I'm taking dart throws at Oakley and Swanson. Now, on the West Virginia side, they've got Garrett Green at quarterback, who is also a dual threat quarterback, who has also been pretty consistent from a fantasy perspective this season. He's actually been more consistent than Avery Johnson. Avery Johnson's had some ups and downs. Garrett Green has been mostly all ups. He's been over 18 fantasy points in every game this season except for week 1 against Penn State, and that's one of the best defenses in the country, right? This West Virginia team is a team that loves to run the football as well, and Garrett Green is one of the guys who runs it. He's had over double-digit rushing attempts in 4 straight games. If this game shoots out, you would be really willing to bet that both of the quarterbacks, Johnson and Green, end up having great games. Both of them are going to be in my lineups. I also love Jaheim White as a play at the running back position as well. He's only $4,500 on DraftKings, back-to-back games of 18 or more fantasy points. He's, in fact, scored touchdowns in 5 straight games. But what I like about White is where the usage is trending. So last season, around midseason, is where, there was a committee between CJ Donaldson and Jaheim White. And around the midway point last year, Jaheim White started to pass CJ Donaldson. And that's where you really saw a big shift. Jaheim White is a much more explosive player. He's also not as big or as strong as CJ Donaldson. So I think as the season goes on, I think when Donaldson starts getting wear and tear, Jaheim White's still fresh. He's still able to make explosive plays. So this season, you're starting to see that as well. Against Oklahoma State, Jaheim White had 19 carries, and against Iowa State, he had 12. And then Donaldson had 20 carries against Oklahoma State, but 9 against Iowa State. So you're starting to see it was 50-50 against Oklahoma State. Now there's a 12-9 edge in favor of Jaheim White. I think both White and Donaldson are in play for me. I'm going to be playing both of them in my lineups. But I think White is a guy that I much prefer because of how the usage is starting to shake out and because he's much more of an explosive player. At the wide receiver spot, the last game kind of made things a little clear for us. There's really only 3 guys in this offense that you want to target, especially now that Jaden Bray is out. It makes things a little more clear for us. Last game, Traylon Ray led the team with 7 targets against Iowa State. Second up was Hudson Clement with 6 and Cole Taylor with 6. All 3 of those guys are cheap. All 3 of those guys are very inconsistent with their production, but they're playing almost every snap, and they're the guys that are getting the targets from Garrett Green. So if you're looking to stack up Garrett Green, Clement, Ray, and Taylor are the 3 guys that you would want. Next up, do I have to talk about this game? It is Iowa heading to East Lansing to take on Michigan State. Iowa is 5.5-point favorites with a game total of 40.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 23-18 in favor of Iowa. For Iowa, I'm going to do one guy justice. I'm going to talk about Caleb Johnson. I'm not going to talk about anybody else on the Iowa offense. Sorry, Cade McNamara. But Caleb Johnson is the engine that makes this offense go. He is one of the best running backs in the country. Iowa has a very good run-blocking offensive line as well. Michigan State surrenders exactly 4 yards per carry, which is a little above average for, FBS as a whole. But they haven't played a rushing attack like this yet with Caleb Johnson. So I do think that, Iowa is going to be able to run the football in this one. They're going to be playing from ahead. This just has Caleb Johnson's smash game written all over it, which, oh, by the way, at $9,100, you really want him to get 27 fantasy points. He has done that in 5 of 6 games so far this season, 2 of which were over 40 fantasy points. Ton of upside with Caleb Johnson. Love him as a play on this slate. He's probably my number 1 overall running back on this slate. On the Michigan State side, they're playing Iowa. This is not a good offense. They're not going to score a lot of points. Aiden Childs at quarterback has been slightly disappointing considering the pedigree he came over with his head coach with from Oregon State. Hasn't been all that great in Big Ten play, and now he's going up against one of the best defenses in the country. Pass. Running back is a committee between Katron Lynch-Adams and Nate Carter. Pass. Wide receiver. Some of these guys have had big games, but you never know who it's going to be on any given game. So pass. Just not playing this Michigan State offense. So let's go ahead and move on to the next game. We've got Kentucky heading to the Swamp to take on Florida. Kentucky is 1.5-point favorites with a game total of 42.5, which is quite ugly, meaning the implied total is about 22-21 in favor of Kentucky. For Kentucky, Brock Vandagriff is at quarterback. He's only $5,100 on DraftKings, but he is a low ceiling play. He has only been above 15 fantasy points one time this season, and that was against Southern Miss. I just don't have any faith in playing him, even as low as the salary is. I don't know, man. I think Florida's actually been better than people give him credit for. Please don't kill me for saying that. But I think Brock Vandagriff not in my player pool this week. At the running back spot, Chip Trayanum is likely to play for this game, which really muddies things because Demi Sumo Karnby had been working as the workhorse back. If Trayanum is back, I think if you're playing enough lineups, you can maybe throw a dart at him. Like this is, transfer from Ohio State. He's an explosive player. He gets work in the passing game as well. I think he's worth a shot if you're playing 20 lineups or more, personally, but not a guy that I'm going to make like an every lineup guy for sure. At the wide receiver spot, there's been a clear overtaking. Dane Key has now taken over wide receiver 1 status from Barryon Brown. He's been the most productive player in this offense. He's had 3 straight games over 20 fantasy points, just consistently getting double-digit targets. To me, he's the most consistent option in this Kentucky offense. He's the guy I'm most likely to play from this offense. I think that Trayanum might make 1 or 2 of my 20 lineups. Key might make 3 or 4. Barryon Brown is a big play waiting to happen, but he's clearly been passed by Dane Key. The only thing that makes Barryon Brown appealing is the fact that he is a big play threat. He's one of the fastest players in all college football, and he's only 3,400. So one big play for a touchdown, he instantly pays off his salary. That's the main redeeming quality about Barryon Brown. On the Florida side, Graham Mertz, which sounds like the name of a Muppet who's designed to teach you semantics of the English language. He is now out for the season, which means that it is now DJ Lagway's time. Almost misspoke there. DJ Lagway's time to be the starting quarterback. He's a super talented freshman. When he got a full game against Stanford, he put up 34 fantasy points, but that was against Stanford. He hasn't gotten to play a full game since. I don't really know what to expect from him. $5,000 is low enough that, like, look, I'm not one to tell you how to spend your money. If you're a believer in the talent of DJ Lagway and you want to play him at $5,000, knock yourself out. But statistically, there's nothing that I can really point to that's going to convince you to play him. At the running back spot, it has been Montrell Johnson Jr., who's been the primary back for this team, but he is questionable for this game. Treyon Webb is also questionable for this game. He's been, the primary RB2. So what happened last week was Jaden Ball ended up being the guy in the second half of that game who really was the only guy getting carries. The downside is he didn't do a whole lot, 12 carries for 25 yards. So maybe at $3,200, is he worth a look? Maybe, but I don't know. I would need word that Johnson and Webb were both out first. And even then, it's hard to talk myself into. At the wide receiver spot, I do think there's a guy that's easy to talk yourself into. Is Eugene Wilson III. He's this team's best receiver by far. He is back healthy. He played the Tennessee game. And you know what a quarterback's best friend is? A really good wide receiver. And so if I'm DJ Lagway and I'm playing my first game, like for real against Kentucky, I'm targeting Eugene Wilson early and often. He had 9 targets against Tennessee, so I do think that is going to continue. $5,500 on DraftKings. I think he's a quite affordable play at the wide receiver position. Last game of the night is going to be SMU taking on Stanford. SMU is currently 16.5-point favorites with a game total of 53.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 35-19 in favor of the Mustangs. So Kevin Jennings is now the quarterback for SMU. His totally outperformed Preston Stone to this part of the season, and Kevin Jennings is like the undisputed starter now, playing all the snaps. He's been pretty good. He is a dual threat. He will run the football as well as throw it. He's had back-to-back games of over 23 fantasy points. I do think there's some upside here. I do think Stanford's defense is quite bad. With SMU projected to score 35 points, man, that's appealing. And he's only $6,700 on DraftKings. I think if I were ranking quarterbacks on this slate, he wouldn't be one. I think I'd have Avery Johnson would probably be number 1 overall, if I'm being honest. Nussmeier would be up there. But in terms of guys under 7,500, I think Kevin Jennings is number 1. I think it's him and Rocco Becht as your 2 options under $7,500. And so if you're looking to save salary at quarterback, I think Jennings is a great option. At the running back spot, Brashad Smith has been the guy. But we've talked about for the last 2 seasons how SMU loves to rotate skill players. They just love to, not play anybody all the snaps. They love to play all their guys. It's a very communist offense. Well, the SMU running back core has been very injured this season. And so Brashad Smith had been seeing all of the work. LJ Johnson was back last game. He only saw 2 carries though. But one of them was a touchdown. So he did vulture some points away from Brashad Smith, but Brashad Smith is still probably going to be the guy. I don't think he's the best option on this slate. $7,600 to me is too expensive for a guy with his profile, but they're projected to score 35 points. Stanford is not a good defense. They're a better run defense than pass defense though. So, I think you could talk yourself into Brashad Smith, but he's not a guy I'm going to be playing a lot of. At the wide receiver spot, again, they love to rotate these guys. They do. It's what they do. Hudson, Maryland, Bailey, and Smith are all going to play a ton of snaps. Brinson being doubtful shortens the rotation a little bit. Derek McFall is slightly interesting because they have used him as a running back in the past, but not in their most recent game. But yeah, I'm probably not going to be stacking Kevin Jennings because A, he's a dual threat, but B, they just rotate these guys so darn much. RJ Maryland will probably be the one guy that I would consider. He had 7 targets against Louisville. In the 2 games that Kevin Jennings has went off, he's had 18 and 14 fantasy points, and he's only $3,800. So if you're somebody that absolutely has to stack your quarterback, RJ Maryland would be the guy that I would go with. On the Stanford side, we don't exactly know what they're going to be doing at quarterback. Justin Lamson started against Virginia Tech, was not good. Ashton Daniels started against Notre Dame, was not good. And then Justin Lamson finished that game. They haven't named an official starter this week. If I had to guess, I would guess Daniels. I think Daniels is better. Just from everything I've seen, Daniels is a better athlete. He's more likely to make things happen. And I think he's a little bit better than Lamson. If I were them, that's who I would be playing. But until we get official word, I don't think either of them are playable. Even though Daniels, a guy that's that athletic, that explosive, $5,500 is appealing if we do get news that he is the starter. At the running back spot, this has been a committee all season long with Ford, Irvin, and Davis. Ford and Irvin are both questionable for this game. I do like Micah Ford's profile long term, but if he's not going to play, which he didn't play against Notre Dame, then Chris Davis is going to be the guy in the backfield. And I think that this is a pretty good spot for Chris Davis against SMU. If he's going to be getting all the carries at only $3,100 with an offense that doesn't trust either of its quarterbacks, I think that's a pretty good punt play at the running back position, if I'm being honest. The wide receiver spot, Alec Ayamander is their guy. This guy's going to play on Sundays. He's their most talented receiver. He is a target monster, has big game written all over him, just hasn't really had one recently. He's worth a shot if you're playing enough lineups, in my opinion. What you saw last game against Notre Dame, though, was he just couldn't out-talent the Notre Dame defensive backs because they're Notre Dame. They're really good defense. And so you saw a lot of targets go to the way underneath of Ismail Cisse. But still, he wasn't all that productive either. Mosley's a true freshman that they're working in. He wasn't all that productive either against Notre Dame. Those are the three guys that are going to play, but it's hard to have confidence in them being all that productive, especially with the uncertainty at quarterback. But like I said, Ayamander's so talented. He breaks off big plays, scores a lot of touchdowns. I wouldn't mind taking a shot on him if you're playing enough lineups. All right, that is going to do it for this episode, y'all. So we got the 7-game night slate covered. Hopefully we gave you guys all the information you need in order to build some winning lineups here for this Saturday night slate. If this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button. It really does help me out a ton when you guys do that on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, please rate and review. I cannot stress enough how much those help me out, and I appreciate it so much. And while you're at it, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of our college football content all the way through the rest of the season, including the midweek slates. Like I said, I'm going to get to what I get to. I can't promise that I'm going to get to all of them, but as many of the slates as possible. But I'm definitely going to be here for the Saturday slates for sure. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Remember, if you do want more from me, follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. Join the Fantasy Corner Discord. Go get the articles on the Patreon if you want to know who actually makes my lineups. But that is going to do it for this episode, y'all. Like I said, best of luck to you guys on the Saturday night slate. If you want to go check out my video on the Saturday main slate, go do that now. It's probably like your time's running out, probably, depending on when you're watching this. So go check that out now. But otherwise, that's going to do it, y'all. Best of luck to you guys on the night slate. Thank you guys for watching and listening. I will see you guys next time. Hook 'em.